With the Scream franchise nearing its 30th anniversary with a 7th film on the way, here's every Scream movie ranked from worst to best. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen these movies, and let's begin. In last place is Scream 4. I can already tell I pissed off at least half of you guys, and trust me, this won't be the only hot take in this video. To start off, this may have my least favorite opening sequence of any of these films. It's more confusing than it's clever, and even though this franchise has always been meta, this opening takes it too far, whereas it immediately takes me out of the movie instead of pulling me in. It may actually be why this film is in last place, because for the first half of this movie, I was completely uninterested in anything happening. It doesn't help that pretty much every new character in this movie is completely forgettable. I did not care about any of these people, and even the actors they bring back feel like they're phoning it in. I remember that I really started to get tired of this franchise when watching this movie. While Scream 2 switched things around with the college setting, and Scream 3 with the Hollywood setting, this is just another movie in Woodsboro with a similar plot and far less interesting characters. But that being said, this movie does get better as it goes along, especially in the third act that actually does something unique and subversive. Once the twist happens and the Ghostface almost got away with it, I was glued to my screen for a good 30 minutes straight. After that, I wouldn't call this a terrible movie. It's easily the worst of the franchise, but I do seem to be in the minority in that, so maybe this would be better on rewatch. Next up is Scream 3. I enjoy this movie a lot more than I thought I would. I kept hearing how this is the worst in the franchise, and even though it feels off, probably due to the rewrites and problematic production, it was still a pretty decent watch. It does feel like Sydney gets sidelined for the first half of this movie, and it isn't as clever as the first two films. This is a movie where I think the franchise started to jump the shark a little bit, and there's some scenes that throw out logic entirely. The main trio, Sydney, Gale, and Dewey, feel like they're pretty much invincible in this movie. There's a scene where Ghostface throws a knife at Dewey's head, and while I feel like that would usually kill someone in this franchise, it instead hits him in the handle and knocks him out. There's also scenes where characters make idiotic decisions, and sometimes not even a meta way. Then there's a Ghostface reveal, which I'm pretty mixed on. I've always seen these films more as mystery movies and slasher movies, as the most entertaining part of watching these films is guessing who the killer is. So a big part of what makes a good Scream movie is a reveal, and the twist that Sydney's long lost brother, who orchestrated the events of the first movie, was interesting but also came out of nowhere. The commentary in this one has aged well, talking about exploitation in Hollywood way before it was a big topic. Other than that, I don't really have anything else to talk about. I'm pretty lukewarm on this, but to its credit, it could have been a lot worse. Next up is Scream 6. This is probably the most frustrating movie in this franchise, as there's some stuff that's really great, and for a while made me think this was going to be the best Scream sequel, and some stuff in the end that fell flat for me and brings this movie down quite a bit. New York is a great setting, and this movie takes full advantage of it. It just feels so fresh to get a unique setting for these movies after the last two films took place in Woodsboro. This is also probably the most violent and aggressive Ghostface we've gotten yet, and some of the goriest kills thus far. This movie actually subverts what you expect from a Scream movie, having one of the killers unmask himself in the opening scene and having 3 killers instead of 2. Stuff like that keeps this franchise creative and fresh, and I hope they continue to do stuff like this. The characters here are very likable, maybe even more likable than the ones in the first Scream. This film really sells me on this new group dynamic, which makes it even more disappointing that we probably won't see these characters again for a while, if ever. But remember when I said the mystery aspect of these films are what make or break the film for me? Well, this may have the worst Ghostface reveal in this franchise. It was actually the only twist I was able to predict correctly in this franchise so far. The minute Detective Bailey said this,
"You fuck with my family, you die."
Oh, so his son is Richie, and I was completely correct. The motives for these killers were already done in the second film, so it just felt stale and repetitive. There's also surprisingly not a lot of kills in this movie. I counted 3 times a character was stabbed or shot multiple times and didn't die, and at this point the characters are more durable than Johnny Knoxville doing the jackass stunt. It's still a good film that was so close to being great but fell short at the end. Next up is Scream 2. Being the first sequel to Scream, this movie had the task of making the first film, which could have easily been a one and done standalone film and justify making into a franchise. I think it does a good job with that. This movie introduces a lot of things that would be synonymous with this franchise, like its stab movies and the themes of the media exploiting these murders for money. The twist at the end was good enough. I kind of forgot about Mickey, especially since he was absent for the entire second half of the movie, and Mrs. Loomis was a little bit more interesting, but still not great. While the first film played into the cliches of horror movies, this movie plays into the cliches of sequels to horror movies.
Number 1, the body count is always bigger. Number 2,
death scenes are always much more elaborate. More blood, more gore.
The new characters in this film are a mixed bag. Some of them are great, but some of them are pretty forgettable and feel like they're just there to be killed off. Out of all these movies, I think this film is the most successful of holding onto the tone of the first movie, and for that, I really like it despite its shortcomings. In second place is Scream. No, not that one, this one. After the disappointment that was Scream 4, I was starting to get tired of this franchise, and even though this film follows a similar formula to the previous films, the new directors and characters make this film feel fresh and new. This movie's commentary on requels and reboots like The Force Awakens, The Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Halloween is pretty good, even naming the movie Scream instead of Scream 5 to make fun of the Halloween franchise. This may also have my favorite Ghostface reveal of the franchise, not because it was super surprising, but mostly because of how it was revealed and the actors just really selling it. Jack Quaid was so good at playing the comedic relief character that he made this otherwise pretty predictable twist really shocking. Also probably helps I know him as Huey from The Boys, so there was some bias, but his change in facial expressions after the reveal was really impressive. Same with Mickey Madison, who, fun fact, was also in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and both films got burned alive. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it was pretty funny. Sam and Tara are also really good additions to this franchise, and the actors they bring back feel like they're giving it their all. I've heard a lot of people say that this movie is too much like the first film, which I completely disagree with. Sure, they both end at a party and have similar antagonists, but pretty much everything else is different. This is easily my favorite sequel in this franchise, but not my favorite Scream movie. In first place is Scream. There really isn't a lot I can say that hasn't been said already. This movie changed the genre, making fun of every cliche in horror movies while not going into full-blown parody. I will say that this is probably my favorite slasher movie of all time. I wasn't a big fan of the first Halloween and thought Nightmare on Elm Street was good, but not great. But what really sets this movie apart from those two are the characters. While Halloween feels like it focuses more on the killer than the main characters, the Scream movie focuses on the characters. The main character is the reason these murders are happening, and a lot of it is about her dealing with her mother's death. The side characters are also very likable and don't feel like they're just there to be killed off like the teenagers in Halloween. Scream is really a one-of-a-kind horror movie, and even though I'm always up for a new Scream sequel, I don't think they'll ever top this one. So in conclusion, here's my final ranking. Scream 4 gets a 5 out of 10, Scream 3 6 out of 10, Scream 6 7 out of 10, Scream 2 8 out of 10, Scream 5 8.5 out of 10, and Scream 9 out of 10. That gives this franchise an average rating of 7.25 out of 10.